The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teal. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teal, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Solutions Info Show. I'm so happy that you joined us today. We have another wonderful program. I'm excited about this. Thank you for tuning in. If you're listening on local Southeast Florida radio or whether you're joining us live on the internet at www.caregiversolutions.info, I am glad that you are here. This program is for family caregivers and others who want to learn more about caregiving, especially when it comes to caring for someone with dementia, like Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's or some other kind of related dementia, maybe from a stroke, which is vascular disease. Lots of different ways people can get memory loss, but this program is to help the caregiver to learn what's coming down the pike to be prepared. It's not easy being a caregiver, and if you're a caregiver, you know that that's really an understatement. So if you're a new caregiver, this is a great resource for you. If you think that Alzheimer's is getting worse, it is. If you don't realize that it's actually becoming a crisis, an emotional crisis, a financial crisis, even a social crisis. There are new figures out from the Alzheimer's Association. The end of 2018, we received all the new data. And I want to share this with you because I think the numbers are actually staggering. So I'm going to be sharing these right now. Just listen. It is really unbelievable. So the 2018 Alzheimer's disease facts and figures just out states that Alzheimer's disease is the sixth leading cause of death in the United States. 16.1 million Americans provide unpaid care for people with Alzheimer's or other dementias. Now, just since this program started about 3 or so years ago, the number has increased over 1 million. I mean, that's staggering. Between 2000 and 2015, deaths from heart disease have decreased, while deaths from Alzheimer's disease has increased. So we're doing better with fixing people's hearts and keeping them alive longer and getting them to live better. But at the same time, the rate of Alzheimer's disease has increased 123% versus 11% of deaths that have decreased from heart disease. 1 in 3 seniors dies with Alzheimer's or another dementia, and it kills more than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. Early and accurate diagnosis could save up to $7.9 trillion in medical and care costs. In 2018, Alzheimer's and other dementias will cost the nation $277 billion. By the year 2050, these costs could rise as high as $1.1 trillion. Unbelievable. 5.7 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's. By 2050, this number is projected to rise to nearly 14 million. Every 65 seconds, someone in the United States develops the disease. It's unbelievable, and it's getting more and more prevalent, especially now because baby boomers are aging. Age is the number one risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. So as we are aging into our 60s, 70s, and 80s, we're going to see that these numbers are going to add up because it is happening, and it's happening to us or to someone that we love or to someone that we know or someone that we know that knows someone. It's really hard to not meet somebody that is not affected with this disease in one way or another. So today we're going to talk about what's being done to help these numbers to take care of this. I mean, it is really staggering. We have a special guest today. He's an actual caregiver, and he's an advocate, and he's going to be joining us in just a moment and talking about what he has done in his life to advocate for Alzheimer's disease, and also what he's done in his life to see what he can do personally to help people that have this disability and their caregivers who take care of them. So I bet that you didn't think Alzheimer's disease, with all the issues that it creates, like I just said, financial, social, emotional, in the community, physical, just every kind of problem you could think of, I bet you never probably associated Alzheimer's disease with political issues. But this is what we're going to be talking about today, because even Alzheimer's disease affects politics. I'm going to bring on my guest now. His name is Jay Schaap. He's a caregiver and an advocate. He volunteers with a lot of organizations, and he's volunteered today to come on to the show to talk about his life and what he's experienced with Alzheimer's and what he can share to help you too. So hi, Jay.
Hi, Marcia. Thank you for having me on. It's nice to see you, and hello, everybody. Pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm so glad that you are here. I've known you for a couple years, and we got to talking one day, and I just thought you have a lot of great experience to share. I know you're retired from your career, but you volunteer a lot, and one of the things that you do volunteer is with Alzheimer's organizations and support groups, and I know that you're really passionate about it. So I thought you would be great today to come on and share and talk about all of this.
Willingly and gracefully, because I've been taking care of my dad, who's had Alzheimer's since I'm in my late 40s, and since he's been in a nursing home for 11 years now.
Wow.
And I'm very fortunate because his condition has not deteriorated as many people do. He still remembers me. He still pushes my buttons. He still says, bring me my favorite foods. So he's a real character, and I love him, and I wish he was closer. He's in North Miami. So,
well, we're going to talk about Dad in more detail in just a little bit. But I want to let everybody know why I'm talking about the political scene and marrying that with Alzheimer's disease. It costs money, just like this actual figure here. Early and accurate diagnosis could save $7.9 trillion. You know, the millions of billions of hours that caregivers are spending, 18.4 billion hours of care valued at over $232 billion. That's a lot of money that caregivers, if they were paid, right, this is what they've calculated would cost to take care of a person with dementia.
And the numbers are staggering, but they've recently skyrocketed because for many years Alzheimer's was underreported. Doctors would fill death certificates out of heart disease or something else, never knowing what was happening in the person's private life. Now it's almost up there with cancer as far as deaths per thousand, and it's passing all these other major diseases year after year after year. So it only makes perfect sense. I can only imagine the population of Florida, how many people down here have early stage onset of Alzheimer's, but have never been diagnosed.
Right. It's too early, or they haven't been proactive about it. So let's talk about what Florida here is doing to get our government, to get our legislatures to understand what this crisis is about, to understand that it is a crisis, to understand that there's needing money to help care for all these people that are coming down the road, being diagnosed and needing some care. So I'm happy to say, and I know you know this, I'm going to be going on an advocacy trip to Tallahassee, which is our state capital. The trip is made by hundreds of people every year going to the state capitol to advocate for Alzheimer's disease. The Alzheimer's Association, they have a group that goes. Our local Alzheimer's Community Care, they have a group that goes. And basically, it's taking caregivers and others that have a passion and have interest to go to Tallahassee to basically state their case. And I want to read from the Alzheimer's Community Care, and that's the group that I'm going to be going with in February. Their purpose of this trip is to educate state legislatures and their assistants regarding the needs of patients and caregivers affected by Alzheimer's disease and related disorders, to advocate for state funding for dementia-specific services provided by Alzheimer's Community Care. That's their purpose. To go there and to meet with legislatures and their aides to advocate for dollars for the state to allocate for these services that are needed so greatly in our state, for support groups, for education, for outreach, for all kinds of things, for research, lots and lots of things. So in February, actually February 12th, 13th, and 14th, I'll be getting on a bus with about 40 other people to go to Tallahassee. And this is the 9th year that Alzheimer's Community Care has made this pilgrimage to the state capitol, and I'm so excited to be able to be a part of it. But I know, Jay, you have already had that great experience. You've been several times, right? And I want to ask you what tips that you might have for me going as a newbie with the group, and you have 2 or 3 times that you've already been, that experience. What would you say to me to get me prepared?
Most importantly, wear comfortable shoes.
Oh, okay. That's a good tip. I imagine a lot of walking, right?
It's a lot of walking, and it's a double-edged sword. You're going to learn how the legislature works, because the group that invites you to come along as an advocate for caregivers is going to schedule appointments with the people that are empowered to change the laws, or their aides, whoever's available. And you start with meeting in the morning for coffee, and they give you a stack of packets, and you have appointments, and you have to go meet and greet. And, of course, one person introduces and then says, these are people that are rubber meets the road caregivers. And in the last few years that I've been going, I can remember showing up for meetings where, yeah, okay, thank you for your time. And now they're like, oh, really? I've heard so-and-so's got this. And the interest from the people we're talking to has increased tenfold in the last 2 times I've gone, where they're actually spending time talking to us rather than just saying thank you for dropping off this information.
Well, that's interesting. So I guess in the beginning, the first few years when you first went, they just didn't think it was that important? Is that what I hear you saying?
It hadn't hit home yet.
Okay.
Nobody realized how widespread it was, how close to home it could hit. Now, everywhere you go, they know someone or had a family member or heard of somebody that's affected, because the dementia is not just Alzheimer's. There's 7 different types of brain dementias, and each one presents differently.
Right.
And they're so difficult to diagnose unless you get proper medical, right up front diagnosis. It could be too late by the time you come into a program.
Well, that's really an interesting observation that they're now listening. But this year, we have a new governor and probably a lot of new other delegates that we'll be talking to. So it'll be interesting because we need to get them on board right, with the program. I know that the Alzheimer's Association, Alzheimer's Community Care have been successful in the past, being able to get money allocated for these services, but you can't stop. I mean, every year it's a fight, to get those dollars. Everybody's out there. All the different social service organizations are out there trying to get dollars allocated from the state government. And we want you to know, Jay and I, that people are fighting for you, the family caregiver. I didn't know for many years that this even happened. But now, I've known for 9 years because Alzheimer's Community Care has been going for 9 years, and I've been, with them and partnered with them for about 15 years. But a lot of caregivers, I think, feel like, who's out there fighting for us? How am I going to get help? Does anybody even care? And the answer is yes, which you can attest to. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about more about what's happening in the realm of Alzheimer's to help caregivers. So we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides.
The inability to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's, particularly among the family members who care for them. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts.
Disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
We're back, and my guest today is Jay Schaap. He is a caregiver, also an advocate, volunteer, and just a general nice person. Thank you for being here, Jay.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
We are talking about what we can do about Alzheimer's disease, and we just explained about the advocacy trip that people make to Tallahassee every year to fight for funds. And Jay has been several times, and I'm going in February. I'm really looking forward to it, to experience that and to hear other people's stories, because when you have these set meetings, and they are set meetings, right, Jay, with our legislature and their aides up there, the caregivers, they actually get to tell their stories, don't they?
Absolutely.
And why is it important, in your opinion, for caregivers to tell their story to our legislatures?
What we have down here is a grassroots organizational approach to taking care of the people that are related to the Alzheimer's victims, okay? And they have fallen through the cracks because the rest of the world doesn't have what we have here, and that's how lucky we have that the Florida legislature recognizes our group and rewards us with budget money for supporting these programs. One of the most important programs you can have is someplace for a respite from taking care of somebody 24 hours, 7 days a week. These daycare centers have a opportunity for someone to go shopping, go to the hair salon, sleep, whatever, and just take a break from being a caregiver. Most caregivers will pass away before the victim ever reaches the end.
From the stress.
From stress and exhaustion.
Yeah.
So treating the problem is not so much as the answer, is giving options to working with solutions.
Right. So until there's a cure, which who knows, right? They're doing research, but until there's a cure, we have to help the caregivers now to help the people that they're caring for. And I think that's a really important fact about the respite care that you talked about, is having funding, because a lot of people don't have the money to pay for a private agency or some other daycare to actually take respite. And so some of this is grants and things like that that can be given to help people, because like you say, if you tell their story, I think it makes it real for somebody.
And that fits right in with your question. I sat in groups speaking to representatives, and one lady I remember brought a scrapbook that she made pictures and stories for her Alzheimer's mother. And every time she visited her mother, she'd show her that same scrapbook, and the mother would respond to the pictures and stuff. And it was a way of them being able to still communicate, because her mother was really further gone than my dad. I'm very lucky. My dad still remembers my name, and we can talk. Some people aren't that lucky. The disease progresses differently with each person.
So, again, telling your story is so important, so it makes it real. We have a picture up on the screen there for those of you that are
Hi, Dad.
On our video feed of Dad. That's Jay's dad, Al, and he is so cute.
He just turned 93 in September.
Wow.
And actually, I told you he died. He was diagnosed by sending me a birthday gift and a watch and a paper in the box that, by the way, I've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And, that was 10 years later. He finally succumbed due to an incident that happened where he went into a hospital with just chest pains. And something happened where he caught aspiration pneumonia, and he went to a nursing home, and he never went home. He was fully functional, driving, leaving alone one day, and now 11, 12 years later, he lives in a wheelchair and in a home.
Oh, I'm sorry. He looks like such a sweet man, and he's got a cute smile on his face, and I'm sure he's very lucky to have you as a son and a caregiver.
And they take great care of him there. I'm lucky to have found a good place.
And another reason why we need help, not only from other people, but from our government, to understand that this is a crisis, that people do need help, that we don't want to let this fall through the cracks, that it is becoming more and more prevalent every single year. And until we find a cure, we have to do something. So I will let you all know how my trip goes on a future show, and we'll be talking about it and my experience and what my observations were. So thank you for prepping me, Jay, and getting me all ready to go to Tallahassee to experience this. So we'll look forward to more information on another show about that. So I want to get back to you and your dad, but before we talk about you caring for your dad, you started being a caregiver at a very young age, didn't you?
Growing up in a small town in upstate New York, there weren't paid services. There was volunteer firemen, volunteer ambulance, and, there was a local constable. So if you needed to have something done, you learned how to do it yourself. I remember there was a program in high school that had us volunteering in the x-ray room at the hospital a couple hours a week. And I remember, going over and helping people then. I think I was 10 or 11. And then as I got older, my grandfather, who had been a farmer his entire life, got sick and had a stroke. And my mother had been working in New York City and traveling every day. And she ended up having to buy a house with a separate apartment because my grandparents were Orthodox. And I was 13, 14, 15. He had 26 strokes.
26 strokes?
He set medical history for the amount of strokes in that time. I think it was 1973 to 1975.
Wow.
Okay. He finally passed away in his own home, in his own bed, and within a year of him passing away, my grandmother totally snapped and lost her memory and spent another 11 years, like my dad, not knowing who she is, in a nursing home in a city close to my mom.
So you learned at a young age, you were assigned actually to be a helper for your grandfather.
Washing, dressing, pills. I could remember, and I can remember I'd come home at night and I'd just tap on the door, and they slept in separate beds. And he's 86 years old, and I look and he's not in his bed, and I see he's on top of my grandmother, and he's waving his hand, "Get out of here, get out of here." So it's love. I keep waiting to have that kind of relationship. I just think it's not in the cards for me.
Wow. So you were exposed to caregiving at such a young age for many years. How do you think that affected you growing up in some way, or have you never really thought about it?
Being a single child in a divorced parental situation, I was first sent to live with my grandparents and then left to be raised by foster brothers and sisters. And I never really fit in with relationships. As much as I tried, I never found a successful way to do it. And if anything I could do over again, I would love to have found someone and spent my life with them. And I'm regretting that now. And I'm 10 years, 12 years down here in Boca, and people are so transient down here. You don't know who to trust. And when you do meet someone, they're gone soon. So I'm available if anybody's interested.
Hey, we'll have to get you on one of these dating shows. But, that, who knows, could have influenced you, being a young caregiver with having that responsibility and probably doing things that a child should not be, requested to do.
I know it made me become involved in certain things at a young age, and then become a workaholic and not look for the relationship by keeping myself busy doing other things. I joined the fire department when I was 18. I was 27 years in the fire department. When I left, I was past president and stuff like that. So, but volunteering is what I do today. Since I've been in Boca, I'm not going to mention organizations, but I out and about every single day, and I'm always looking to spend more time and help more people. I used to take little old ladies and men shopping, but they're dying on me left and right. So.
Oh, well, thank you for all that volunteering, because we love our volunteers and we need volunteers. I don't know what the world would do without great volunteers. So thank you for that. We're going to take our second commercial break, and we come back. We're going to talk more to Jay about what he sees in the future for him having a parent and a grandparent diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Please come back.
The inability to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's, particularly among the family members who care for them. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. Feelings of depression, isolation, and frustration are common among persons living with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's common among those who care for them, too. It takes a lot of patience and courage. It also takes knowing when you can no longer do it alone. At Arden Courts, memory care is all we do. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Don't let guilt keep you from making the right decision. Visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Somewhere at the corner of bewildered and confused is a lost mother, a father, a sibling, a grandparent. Wandering is a common symptom of Alzheimer's or related dementias and can often make those who care for a loved one feel just as lost. If you're looking for a place that's safe and secure, look to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know. We understand. We can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines.
An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our national sponsor, Arden Courts Memory Care Communities. Arden Courts has 10 dementia-assisted living communities right here in Florida and about 50 total across the United States. One of the things that Arden Courts likes to do is help caregivers. And not only do they take great care of their residents, but they like to care for that family caregiver by giving resources. In addition to support groups and seminars, they're giving this book away for free to you just for the asking. This is called the 36-Hour Day Book. I highly recommend every caregiver reading this book. As the title suggests, it's like trying to fit in 36 hours into a 24-hour day if you're a caregiver. This book is free just for the asking. All you have to do is call Arden Courts on their toll-free number, which is 888-478-2410. Again, 888-478-2410. Let them know that you heard about this free offer of the 36-Hour Day Book on the Caregiver Solutions Info Show, and they'll get your information and mail a book right to you. So do it today. You'll be glad that you did. So my guest today is Jay Schaap, and Jay and I have been talking about a lot of things, but he is a volunteer. He's an advocate for caregivers. His dad actually is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease for many, many years, and he's in a nursing home now. So I want to ask you a few questions, if I may, about your dad.
Certainly, please do.
So did your relationship change from what it was with your dad before he got sick and before he had Alzheimer's to afterwards? Was there a major change in his personality, or was there a change in the way that you related to him?
I wish you would have asked me if I could be pre-asked that question. My dad and I have had a contentious relationship. He left when I was young, but he's kept in touch all my life.
But you don't have to tell lot of personal things.
I'm just saying now I'm solely responsible for surrogacy, advocate. I get the phone calls 24 hours a day.
You're his power of attorney.
Power of attorney, and they have still kept him making his own decisions, even though he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I can't force him to do anything. So when he doesn't take his pills, because he says, I don't want to take them, I get the phone call. When he slips and falls and he has to go to the hospital and be checked out, I get the phone call. When he starts an argument with someone or gets thrown out of a store because he's like being belligerent because he's a New York City boy, he'll tell you to go take a long walk on a short pier. He did that when he was young. Why should he change when he's old? So I tolerate my dad.
Okay.
And he pushes my buttons whenever he can. So I've learned that I can't do much about the situation I'm in, but it's changed dramatically. When I was younger, I kept my distance and visited him on occasion. Now I'm this close that I can visit all the time, and I try to get as much time that I can tolerate.
But it's almost that you're, I don't want to say the word force, but the opportunity presents itself for you to be his caregiver because you are an only child, and who else is going to do it if not for you, right? And you mentioned a lot of the other relatives have already passed away. So here's a situation where maybe you all didn't have the best relationship growing up, and now it's sort of like, okay, Jay, now this is what you have to do. And that must be very difficult.
It's a duty, and it's a necessary duty that I take willingly upon myself. And there's times that I regret it, I lose sleep over it, but to be honest with you, as long as he's comfortable and happy and has his needs met, I'd say live to 100 years old. I mean, he was diagnosed with a blocked artery when he was first injured in the hospital, and they never took action. It was 2 years ago. He's been in a nursing home 11 years now. They said to me, he needs a new pacemaker battery. I said, for what? He's in a nursing home. Well, okay. So he got a new lease on life, and they put his new battery in. The next month, it's like, we want to put a stent in him. I said, he's 91 years old. Well, I asked the family, and I asked the doctors, and the doctor says, give him a new lease on life. So, I mean, what is his happiness ratio? He's living in a place where he gets 3 hots and a cot, so to speak, and they treat him nicely. I just hope I did the right thing, because it was agonizing for me to make those decisions.
Well, again, it was kind of forced on you to be the decision maker, but it was also forced on your dad to end up where he is because of a lot of health problems, and he never really got to come home once he went into the hospital, and he had to spend his rest of his days in a nursing home because of being, bedridden from his illnesses. which is unfortunate. But I'm sure your story, is relatable to a lot of other people out there. But I want to ask you a question. You said that the nursing home calls you for every little thing. Dad doesn't want to take his pills. They call you. What can you do from an hour or two away?
Health laws require that if a patient is injured, family must be notified.
Right.
Other things like taking pills, it's debatable. I mean, for a while there, they called me all the time. Now they call me and tell me once a month that he's still non-compliant with the pills. But you got to realize some of these pills are required because he has a stent and he's not taking the cholesterol pill. So how do you explain it to him if he's obstinate about not taking them? I've given up.
Do they put him on the phone?
Oh, yeah. Well, if he's really having a bad day and acting out, I'll say, listen, just put him on the phone with me. And he calms down and the problem's resolved until the next time.
Right.
Okay? But it's...
So he might take them. Sometimes you can get him in the right mood and convince him to take his pills?
Easily enough done, yes. Okay. He gets up in his own head about lots of stuff, and 5 minutes from now, he'll tell you the same thing over again because he doesn't remember. It's his short-term memory, and I'm lucky. I'm really lucky. He could tell you stories about when he was growing up in the Bronx and war stories and how and why he married my mother and why he left my mother, which is pushing my button. But, this is my father's shtick. He does this, and that's I tolerate, and I still love the hell out of him. I'm glad I still have him.
Well, that's really, really, really nice, considering, the depth of your relationship and what transpired and what got you here and what got him here. And that's why I said you're just a nice guy, because a lot of people would throw their hands up and, just say, I can't do this.
Walk away is the word, and I just can't do that. I've thought about it, but I just haven't. One thing we're probably going to bring up that I mentioned, that I was concerned, do I have the gene? Is it in my future? And being part of the support group, I've learned a lot, and I know what to do and who to go to.
So let me ask you that question, because your dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Your grandmother had Alzheimer's. Are you afraid of getting Alzheimer's?
Absolutely. I'm single. I have no family, so to speak. I don't know whether to spend every bit of my savings before I'm 70 and can't remember what to do, or whether to try to live to be 90 and still have a good brain. So it's a tough decision. I lose a lot of sleep over it. I've actually taken steps to have myself properly diagnosed and tested, and I've even gone so far as to apply for some experimental drugs in a clinic, but unfortunately I missed by 1 point as far as qualifying. The good news is I'm not carrying the gene, okay? That doesn't mean I'm not going to come down with it, okay? My lifestyles have precluded the healthiest options, okay? Obviously weight, and I'm an ex-smoker, and some other things we can't talk about here. But we've learned through our support groups, excuse me, I'll just silence this.
We've got a choo-choo train trying to come through the radio station.
I apologize, folks.
That's okay.
I've learned through support groups that your basic, I lost my train of thought, I'm sorry.
You learn resources, of where to go. So you were proactive. You wanted to know if you were susceptible to getting this diagnosis.
Okay, I'm back on track.
Okay.
There is a psychological psychiatrist type of test. It's a 6-hour test. They have to do it in 2 sessions. And then there's the genetic testing, and then there's sleep apnea testing, and then you go back for your diagnosis, and they tell you whether you have the gene or whether you're prone to getting the disease. And it turned out I'm probably not going to. But I'm taking precautions that I've learned from our support group. Important diet, important exercise, and of course, mind issues. Do crosswords, conversations. I go to several different meetings during the week at libraries, discussion groups, whether it's current events or Socrates cafes, just to keep my mind stimulated. Because, you sit home alone, you could just flip into not using your brain or your body, and these are the important things you have to do to keep active and prevent the disease from sneaking up on you, which it does.
Yeah, it can, very, very much so. So you wanted to go into a trial study. Didn't you say that there were some trial studies that maybe they would have you go into to be a participant, but you have to have a caregiver, right?
Absolutely. There's some world-famous doctors running studies right here in our area. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the doctor, but he sounds like a Sherlock Holmes character. And he has an active online clinical trials in person, and you have to go through this testing process. And I was within 1 point, and unfortunately, because I don't have someone that would go with me every other week for the infusion of the drug, they wouldn't allow me to participate in the program.
Yeah, that's one of the requirements I know is having what they call a care partner.
Somebody that could recognize subtle changes in your life. Now, if I was with someone, that would be a no-brainer, but unfortunately, no one knows me as well as someone could.
Right, exactly. There are quite a few doctors in South Florida right here, different neurological centers that are conducting research and have many studies going on. I know 3 right here in Palm Beach County that are doing research, which is very, very important. And I love the fact that you were proactive to go and take all of this testing. You must have been pretty nervous about it, were you?
It is what it is, okay? Just like I've conquered smoking and food addictions, I try to keep my mind calm and not think about it too much, because you could easily get caught up in it. And you know, if you think too much, it becomes true. That's just the way of human nature. You know, if you think you're going to break your leg, the chance you fall down and break your leg.
Yeah, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
You know, if it doesn't happen organically or naturally, you'll probably drive yourself crazy thinking that you're crazy, even if you're not. So I like your thinking about keeping busy, keeping focused on positive things. I think that everybody should do that, whether they have a history of Alzheimer's in their family or not, because we all need to strive for better health, and the healthier your brain, the healthier your body, and everything that they say is good for your heart is good for your brain. So, you know, if you're wondering what I should do, Jay mentioned a lot of good information, but if you're wondering what else can I do, anything that's good that they say is good for your heart. You know, the diet, the
Mediterranean
exercise.
diet, exercise, brain teasers for your head.
But all
good
of
stuff.
that will affect your brain. So your heart and your brain, I guess, you know, the 2 biggest and important organs in our body, because, of course, the brain, you know, tells everything else what to do. But we talk about our head and our heart and want to be in sync with that. So we want to be in sync with our head and our heart when it comes to not just the way we feel, but how we take care of them also. So we'll go to last commercial break, and we'll be right back with more.
Thank you.
Feelings of depression, isolation, and frustration are common among persons living with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's common among those who care for them, too. It takes a lot of patience and courage. It also takes knowing when you can no longer do it alone. At Arden Courts, memory. Somewhere at the corner of bewildered and confused is a lost mother, a father, a sibling, a grandparent. Wandering is a common symptom of Alzheimer's or related dementias and can often make those who care for a loved one feel just as lost. If you're looking for a place that's safe and secure, look to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines.
Nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teal, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on CareGiverSolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Welcome back. My guest today is Jay Schaap, and Jay has been so gracious to come and tell his story. And we're talking about why everybody should tell their story. First of all, I think that it's important for us to say it out loud. Sometimes caregivers have a hard time relating or sharing what the burden they're going through, which brings me to the next part of this the segment here, is to talk about things that caregivers struggle with. I know it's probably not easy for you to come on and talk about your dad and his Alzheimer's and what all you all went through, and it's not hard or not easy for anybody to do that, but again, it's important for lots of reasons. Number one, talking about it to our government to try to get funding, talking to family members, right, to share with other family members what a caregiver might be going through. Why is that so important? I know you have sat in on a lot of support groups and you listen to a lot of caregivers and their stories. Why is it important for caregivers to share outside of the support group?
Excellent question. Years of sitting in groups and seeing people come in with the bewildered looks on their faces and asking us, what's going to happen? How do we know when it's time? What do we expect? And the first thing we need to make sure is that they have time for themselves and they don't get lost in the disease, okay? So if you are thinking that you know someone that has this and you want to go to a support group, just go online and find them. They're out there. Walk in, say hello. People like myself and registered nurses are there attending, so we're not going to give you bad information. You're welcome to ask any questions. There's nothing that's taboo. There's nothing that's off limit. And we'll give you upfront, honest, personal answers. What to expect, not necessarily when to expect it, because everybody progresses at a different rate.
Nobody knows that answer.
And nobody can answer that.
Right.
But there's supporting documentation that explains the stages and what goes along with the stages. And, you know, I'm not sure I mentioned Joe and Joy, my first exposure to Alzheimer's.
No.
They ran the local insurance company in my town. And they retired, and they were a nice, loving couple. One day I was standing behind Joe, and Joy was standing behind Joy, and Joe was standing next to her, and she said, "Joey, be quiet." And I said, "That's kind of weird. They're in their 60s. And then I heard later that he had severe Alzheimer's. And a couple months later, I was standing there, and he's holding her hands going, "Mommy, can I have some candy?" And it's like, oh, my God. This is like less than 6 months from the time I heard he had it. And within 2 or 3 months, he had passed away. So it's a progression in reverse of what we learned from the womb to adulthood, but just imagine that happening in reverse. Mm-hmm. First it's motor skills and memory skills, then it's other important functions that slowly go away to the point where the person's brain just isn't there anymore. Mm-hmm. So like I've said, I'm lucky I have my dad and he remembers me, and if you're involved with someone who has dementia, it makes sense that you get it recognized early. There's now tests out there doctors can do. You have to ask them to do it. It's nothing that doctors will do standard. Just like there's no standard testing for certain diseases. You have to go specifically if you suspect it. Mm-hmm. But there is ways to have a PET scan, a blood test, a genetic marker, just a 5-minute verbal test or a 6-hour test will give a good idea of where the person's mental capacity is.
Yeah, it sounds like your friends there, when you were growing up, his Alzheimer's actually progressed very quickly. However, on the reverse side, your father, who has it already for like 12 years, is slowly progressing. And for people out there that wonder, well, what's the difference? Again, nobody can tell you how fast or how slow it progresses, although the Alzheimer's itself can last from 2 to 20 years, but the average is usually about 8 to 10 years, somewhere in there. So, your dad might be one of those ones that's going to be, like you say, 100, and it could be because people can live a long time with very slow progressing Alzheimer's disease. So just wanted to throw that out there. A lot of people don't understand that, and they also don't understand sometimes that Alzheimer's is not an old person's disease, that people in their 40s can get Alzheimer's, and 50s and 60s, and so it's not just for old people. Very much more rare to be diagnosed at an early age, but it can happen. So to your point, Jay, yes, people should be proactive. If you suspect anything, something's off or something's not right, be proactive, get tested, go to the doctor and say, gee, this is what I've noticed and what can we do about it? Let's check it out and see what's going on.
And being a state of single retirees and older people, if you have a neighbor and you think there's something not right, go out of your way to start checking on your neighbor, maybe get in touch with their family member and let them know that something's not right. Because people that have long-distance relationships with their family members can't see what's happening right in front of your eyes. So be someone's advocate.
That is very true, because older folks can cover up when their children call from up north, and they can answer questions just like what you would expect to hear, but it's not necessarily the truth.
Exactly.
And so that's called covering up, and they are very good at it sometimes. So back to the support group, when people go, I think sometimes they feel safer talking to strangers about what is going on rather than maybe reaching out to families or maybe friends at first, because there's a stigma of being embarrassed or ashamed type of thing. I did a support group not too long ago. I facilitated, and it was not here in this area. It was on the other side of the state. And a lady came, and it turned out it was in the evening, and she was the only one that showed up. And I'm glad that she was, because she really opened up. I had never met this woman before, but she opened up to me, and she started crying and telling me her story. And hers was a horrible story, because she was actually dealing with a husband. It was a remarriage, but he had Alzheimer's after they were married, and he was abusive to her. And he was beating her up, and verbally and physically. And she hadn't really told anybody before. And so coming to this support group where she felt safe and she could let out her feelings, and I advised her, what next steps she should take. But it's important to take those steps.
In Florida, there is a law that mostly applies to people with drug issues or mental illness issues. But if a person, as you say, is in a physically abusive relationship and they don't feel safe, they're allowed to do what's called Baker Act, their spouse, their child, their neighbor, and that gives a 72-hour observation window for that person to be in an environment where they can be checked out. And that's enough time to figure out whether he's ever or she's ever coming home, and because you're not safe there.
Right.
I've heard the same stories, and people are thankful that their spouses were taken away or finally passed away because they couldn't deal with it any longer. One lady kept talking about her husband used to walk around with a screwdriver in his pocket, and she never knew when she was going to be stabbed. And it's true, and it happens every day.
It does, and it does. And these are things that a lot of people don't talk about. These are real, true stories that you would say, oh my God, how could that ever happen? But it does. And that's why Alzheimer's disease and other related dementias is a terrible thing, because it makes people behave in ways that they normally wouldn't. It's not the same person anymore. They can change their behaviors. They can change lots of different things that you would never even think of in a million years, but it can happen. So I am so glad that you're here talking about this, Jay, because I could talk to you for another hour, I think, because it's so important to share all of this and to tell our story. Tell your story. If not at a support group, tell your story to your family physician. Tell your story to your family members of what you're going through. Don't be ashamed. Don't feel guilty.
If I could pass anything out to the people listening, is find a support group, go there, even if it's nobody in your family, even if you just want to learn. Go, ask questions, and pay attention. You'll get an eyeful and an education.
That's right. Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here with us, Jay. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for being here today.
I hope you have a marvelous trip to Tallahassee and advocate well for the cause.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to it, and I'll be sharing with everybody my findings. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, you can call Arden Courts, 888-478-2410 to get your free copy of the 36-Hour Day book. It's a wonderful book for caregivers. And join us next week. We'll have more information and more tips, and I can't wait. And in the meantime, don't forget, give somebody a hug because they need it and so do you. We all do.
Thanks for listening, folks.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teal. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week for more Caregiver Solutions.